How has MIT continued to influence? MIT was someone who was so committed to equity and equality and who understood that there wasn't a level playing field out there for oppressed and disenfranchised individuals and communities, and really took that to heart. Her passion to create that space, to create a place where people could um, compete in a way that was equitable, that was going to benefit the larger society, and kind of her um, raison d'etre. It was her reason for being. And it's something that continues to infuse how I think about my work, getting up every day to chip away at these systems, interlocking systems of oppression. Mitt was very aware of how the game was stacked and really the strategy for how to get us to a better place and to success.
That is amazing to be able to follow the footsteps of these two powerhouse women. I find them very informative. They both have very similar paths where they're fighting for unjust women's rights, civil rights. And what I find with Miss Joyner, because she's more tangible to me than Miss Height, is that she truly believes in everyone deserve equal justice, not just certain people, but and then being a social worker, a newly social worker, and a woman of color, I just feel like I'm going to stand on their shoulders and I'm going to be able to reach other communities that are feeling unjust. And I'm just very grateful that these two women decide to be these amazing trailblazers and able to accommodate where there is an intersectionality of communities that are lacking services, and how they're able to make that fight and to give us strength to continue the fight as massive as they did. I think one of the most impactful story with both of them combined is when I decided to become a social worker. I was actually in education first, and I was in my field experience part, and I was wanting to tie the shoe of a student. And I said to him, "Take your shoe off because your laces are all connected to your shoe, and I'm not going to be able to tie it correctly." And he said to me, "Behind the cubby." He said, "I can only take my shoe off behind the cubby." And I was like, okay. So he takes his shoe off, and I noticed that they were not as clean. His clothes weren't as clean. So I didn't make a big deal at that moment. I just tied his shoe, put it back on. But I went and bought extra socks and things that I thought this student needed. And I took it to the guidance counselor, and she said to me, "Well, do you really think that's going to make a difference in his life?" And I was like, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Well, the mom, they don't really care." I'm like, "Well, we don't stop fighting here. We keep fighting until we reach an auntie, an uncle, a grandma, someone in his family cares about this child. So just because mom may not exemplify, there's other people in his community that cares for him. And I think we should go ahead and extend ourselves." And I just felt like that guidance counselor was giving that family such an unjust moment of assistance and being able to reach this family because they were lacking. And I remember going home, I need to be bigger than a classroom. I need to be able to reach families. I need to be a social worker. And I just think that is probably definitely a moment where I feel like, especially Miss Joyner was able to reach communities where they felt like it wasn't tangible, where people felt like that they didn't have hope or no one else believed in them. Just imagine that the school counselor was like, "That's enough." And so, if we have social workers that's able to tap into families, then we can definitely give communities the services that they need. That's why it was the biggest impact for me.
As you heard me say earlier, that my dissertation is titled "The Status and Objections to the Passing of the Dorothy Whitney M. Young Jr. Social Work Reinvestment Act. That is one powerful piece of research, as you know, as Dorothy Height knows or knew, along with Dr. Mitt Joyner knew that research. So let me tell you about this story. In my recommendations, the research talks about rebranding our profession as well as branding our profession. There's a piece in my research that talks about how the public has an unrestricted use, Dr. Henderson, of the title social workers. And we know as social work practitioner that there are people who do human services and there are social workers. But you heard me talk about earlier, the media, that when situations occur, whether there's a riot or there's a baby who's been abused or there's a woman who's in a domestic violence situation, or there's some inequities related to marginalized people or the mistreatment and maltreatment of the LGBTQ community, the homelessness folks, or whatever, and the list goes on. But getting back to my research, I think about that particular research when one of the things that I have been challenged to do, not only by you, former Congressman Towns, and the legacy of Dr. Dorothy R. Height, but I started the Social Work Reinvestment Act lecture series to continue to encounter conversations related to the fight for social justice, human rights, and civil rights. So with the work of Dorothy R. Height in the background and having multiple conversations following the work with Dr. Mitt Joyner, along with you, Dr. Henderson, it wasn't too many places where Dr. Mitt Joyner was, particularly doing social work. Mother, we both know that where we were not present, we were not in the room. And then when the pandemic hit, it opened up an opportunity for us to be in the room with Mitt all the time, no matter where she was. But I remember, when the pandemic hit, we were at your social work caucus roundtable event, the inaugural social work caucus roundtable event, and Congress shut down. So we went to this reception, and Dr. Joyner said, "Now, Dr. J, you know how she talks to you. You need to continue with the legacy of the Social Work Reinvestment Act lecture series." Okay. And then, because what I had done was when I joined the professional team at Johnson C. Smith University, what it became was the Dorothy I. Height social work lecture series. But Dr. Mitt Joyner and you pretty much said the continue with the Social Work Reinvestment Act lecture series, which focuses specifically on the fight for human rights, social justice, and civil rights. And that's what we have been doing, just keeping conversations going. How else am I doing it? Writing proposals for national social work conferences and presenting conversations about the legacy of Dorothy I. Height, as well as now the legacy of Mitt Joyner.
Dr. Mitt Joyner and Dr. Dorothy I. Height, I would say that they impacted my view and everything on human rights and everything like that, because Dorothy I. Height, she fought for the human rights and everything that was going on during that time. And she even helped put together the March on Washington, even though women couldn't be a part of it. And she stuck through it, and that really impacted me because she was resilient. Even though she couldn't be on the front line with everything, she still stuck through. And it shows how resilient she is and how I can be resilient as I navigate through my profession through social work. And Dr. Mick Joyner, just her leadership roles and not stopping for what she believed in, and even having the conversations with mid and critical conversations. So that really impacted me also, to just stand up for what you believe in and continue broadcasting it and getting others involved in it. With Dr. Dorothy I. Height, with the March on Washington, how she continued to put things together and gather individuals and put everything pretty much together, even though she couldn't really be a part of it because women couldn't really be a part of it, and how she stuck through it, continue advocating, and how she became a pioneer. And with Dr. Mick Joyner, how she's have breaking barriers and having different things with social work. And even I watched videos of her fighting for human rights with everything that was going on with the overturn Roe versus Wade. She continued to talk about it and how important our bodies are. And just overall with human rights, that should be a part of human rights. We should be able to make a decision on our bodies.
She remains a human lighthouse because it so captures the essence of her spirit. If you think about, what a lighthouse is, this beacon of hope and direction and protection that appears in our lives in moments of uncertainty and in times of storms. And that's, to me, personifies her life, her legacy. There was an authenticity about her and a sincerity and a way of leading that was at the same time extraordinarily humble. And I think about so many examples of leadership today that are the opposite of that. Not humble, not seeking the greater good, which is what she did, and it explains a lot of her effectiveness. There was never any question about her heart. There was never any question about her intent, especially when it came to young people. And she was clear and unambiguous about what she felt she had been put here for. And you could just feel that in your interactions, with her. My interactions with her specifically was because I had emerged out of the foster care system. And it, on the one hand, was a reflection of the turbulence in a burdened system because it cost me a childhood. On the other hand, the individuals in that system who kind of paved the way to my freedom and my independence, to me, were an example of the well-intentioned part. And I knew that Mitt knew that I was not going to walk away from that part of my journey. Regrettably, so many do, in all candor. And I felt like I had a responsibility to say, no, I'm how the story can actually turn out. But it was never lost on me that I needed people like Mitt to help give me that chance that I needed. And then lastly, I reflect on the void, that I feel. Mitt was just one of those personalities that you felt would be here forever, and And so I still have to do this kind of extra click, to realize, no, I can't pick up the phone and call her anymore. Well, I can talk to her. I think we all can still do that. Because that was the just nature of her, her presence and her impact. But it should be equally clear that Mitt was very urgent too. There was an urgency about the way she went about her life's work, and you could feel that. And yet it was done with such grace, that it wasn't that overriding urgency sometimes that can be alienating and off-putting. It wasn't that at all. But you always understood it because you knew that it was coming from a place where she understood that children were in crisis, that systems were not protecting them and helping them. And she also did such a wonderful job of coalescing people too, bringing people together. She was a wonderful, wonderful mentor to so many in the profession. That should not be lost. I think any of us, as we get a little bit older in our life, there comes a time when you are most measured by whether or not you are a guide, whether or not you're a lighthouse to somebody. It's not about your title and how much money you're making and how many people are reporting into you and your span of control. You're going to be most measured by whether or not you are building your profession, whether you're building up young people in that profession. That's what you're measured by. By that standard, she has no peer because there was nobody greater than her, at that. And that for me is instructive for so many of us, regardless of sector that, that you're in. She did it in many ways the right way. And then lastly, the attributes of the lighthouse that I so associate with Mitt and her life and her legacy. So if you think about the lighthouse as an architectural structure, it's an amazing structure for a couple of reasons. One, as a functional matter, we don't need lighthouses anymore because technology guides us in the way that the lighthouse used to. So now satellites, global positioning systems tell you where you are. Well, sailors of yesteryear needed a lighthouse, and yet it's still indoors, which is an ironic thing, isn't it? Why is it that this technology and the structure that we no longer need is still around? 22,320 of them to be exact. And here's why it's around still, why we're preserving them, why they're museums and landmarks and hotels. It's because they remind us of the best elements of humanity. So you think about what a lighthouse does, and specifically what a human lighthouse like Mitt did. She was there to guide and to protect your journey, probably more than anything else. And whether you were a young professional or a child, even if you never met her, she was trying to put up systems and structures to guide and to protect, and also to correct, your path. The lighthouse turns doubts into destinations. It sees possibilities where others only see circumstances. It gives what it can with the time that it has. It doesn't seek reward. It's not an egotistical structure. It's not a look at me. In fact, the lighthouse doesn't even summon you towards it. It doesn't say, come to me because I have all the answers. It's not what the lighthouse does. The lighthouse actually points in another direction towards safe harbor and says, that's the way to go. That's the way to safety. And the attribute of the lighthouse that most reminds me about Mitt, they're all applicable to her. But the one that I most associate with her is that the lighthouse never knows who sees it and who is touched by it and who is impacted by it. Mitt will never know the full impact of her human lighthouse effect, because we'll speak about her for generations to come. We'll tell our children about her. Those countless and unseen will benefit from her life, her legacy, because in our lifetime, we're just never able, you're never able to say thank you, for all that she represented. And the lives that she has touched, what those people will go on to do, that they'll become outstanding social workers. Those young people will go on to have the one thing that may have been denied them, which is a family of their own one day. And they will break a cycle perhaps that they inherited. But it's all tied back to her. You know, it's tied back to the things that she tried to do. So therefore, any of us who knew her, we have this awesome responsibility to her, actually. If you want to thank Mitt for her life and her impact upon you, then you have to continue her life's work with the urgency and the authenticity and the humility and the greater good and the selflessness and the seeking no reward way that she did it, because that's how she would want it. Not for herself necessarily, but because she knows and knew that to embody those things was to also touch and impact other people's lives, which is all that she ever really, really wanted.
Dorothy Heights was a very special lady, and she was always the kind of person that would encourage you. I mean, and would say to you things like, well, you know, when you have a fight, you know, you can always expect something to be in your way, because when you're on your way, always look for something to be on your way. If you're not going anywhere, nothing will ever be in your way. And she would come into my office, and later on in life, she was in a wheelchair. They would roll her in, and she would say, sit down here, you know, as if it was her office. She was telling me where to sit. And she said, let me explain to you what we need to do. And of course, I had just so much admiration and respect for her, because I knew about her days in the civil rights movement, how she was working with Dr. Martin Luther King and Jose Williams and all of that and crew, and that she was the only woman to really to speak at the March on Washington, to be on the platform and to talk. And because during those days and times, you know, women, you know, still sort of pushed to the side. They were not brought to the forefront. And of course, Dorothy Heights had a lot to do with that. When she would sort of step out there and say, we need to do this and need to do that. And of course, she was highly trained and educated, you know, with at Columbia University and NYU. And there was not a selfish bone in her body. I mean, she just felt that if I can help somebody, then my living is not in vain. And she would always talk about the fact that if you're in a position to be able to do something for people, don't hesitate to step out and do it. And I was always moved by that. And always she would always say, well, don't get too upset about disappointments and what people might say, and that, you know, it's always going to be negative things said about you, but your problem is that you have to make them not be true. And she was a social worker every day and every night, and was encouraging you in every way. And of course, I can never forget about my good friend Mitt Joyner. You know, Mitt was the kind of person that she always took every moment to teach. She felt that if she had some information, she wanted to sort of share it with everybody, and that she didn't hesitate to sort of come to any kind of meeting and gather it. I remember I asked her one time, she came to a meeting. I said, Mitt, you know, your organization or somebody paying for this? She said, no, it's coming out of my pocket, because I feel that it's important for me to be here, to be able to say and to feel. And of course, she shared some things with me that I thought was important, and that was a commitment to being involved politically. To, if you're not going to run for something, but do not hesitate to get involved in what they're doing. Meet your elected officials. She always said, know them, let them know you, and don't hesitate to go to meetings. And if you have questions, raise them. And see in terms of getting an answer. And of course, that to me was very, very, very important. And the other thing that I think that she talked about a lot was running for office. She said that we need to stress that more than ever. Our philosophy of sort of fixing things after they were broken was something that we should think very seriously about and look to change. that we needed to get involved in what was going to happen and how we could prevent it from ever occurring. And the way you would do that would be to get to know the political person, get involved in the issues, or run for office, or be involved in terms of by somebody that was running for office, or to be in a position to work with a person that had been elected to office. That social workers had the background and qualification to be able to do all of these things, and that we would talk about it, that no one was more qualified to be involved in that arena than social workers, based on our training, based on our background, and all the kind of things that go into making an effective politician, which is to commit yourself to trying to improve the quality of life of people. That's us, she would say. Our training and our background, really, no one has more qualifications to do that than us. And she felt very strongly about that. Now, I'm hoping that we can be able to turn some things around, that even though they're gone, that we will be able to make them proud of us. Because as we look now in the United States House of Representatives, and I served there for 30 years, and when I left, we had 12 social workers in the United States House of Representatives. Today, we're down to 2. We have a lot of work to do. Now, one would say, well, what would Dorothy Height say in a situation like this? She would probably say, putting people on Capitol Hill to work in the various offices. And out of that will come the involvement that's necessary to be able to go out and run for office, and not to be afraid. I was on a meeting just recently, and where I was talking to social workers about running for office, and the person said, well, I don't want my life to be out there in the public, and and of course I asked him, did he have a cell phone? And he said yes. I said, well, then it's out there. You don't have to worry about it being out there. It's there already. And I just could imagine what Dorothy Height would have said to him when he raised that kind of question or issue with her, because she was always direct with a smile and a hug. She always would do that. She would smile and she would hug. And because that was part of her way of encouraging you to do things and to get things done. She missed, people like Dorothy Height and Mick Joyner. They are really, really missed because of their ability to encourage. And the other thing was, they put a lot of time and effort and energy. I mean, if you had a meeting somewhere, Dorothy Height would show up. If you had a meeting someplace, Mick Joyner would show up. I never forget, we were at I was on a board with her, and I asked her, what you? She said, no. I said, you didn't stay here today? No. I came down from my home. I taught at the school, and then I came here because I felt it was important to give my input to this meeting. And of course, her input was extremely important. So when you look back today and you think about the commitment and dedication of a Mick Joyner and a Dorothy Height, and then we think about where we are in the field of social work in terms of involvement, I feel that we have a lot of work to do. And I'm hoping that someone else will catch the spirit that Dorothy Height had and Mick Joyner, and see if we can't begin to turn some things around, recognizing that it's not always our job to go fix something that's broken. It's not always our job. Some social workers think that that's all we're supposed to do, is fix when it's broken. No, we're supposed to make certain that it's not broken, and that then we don't have to fix it. So I'm hoping that we can get more folks involved, like Mick Joyner and Dorothy Heights, because they are missed. They're really missed. But I think about them quite often as I continue to be involved in the field, and as I go to meetings, and oftentimes I quote Dorothy Height, based on some of the things that she would say, in meetings, because her theme was don't give up, and you have something to contribute. Yes, some other people might have more to contribute, but you can make a contribution. And she would always say that. And of course, she would always talk about standing on the sideline. She would always talk about that. Being a referee and all that. She would use those kind of comments in terms, talking about. She said, "We don't need nobody to officiate. We need somebody to negotiate." I mean, she would all those kind of phrases were kind of things that she would use and say, but always pointed towards encouragement. That was her thing. And then she would pat you on the back and give you a hug and say, "Look, we can do this." And you would be, "Well, no, we can do it." And you would probably raise another issue like, "Well, what about the resources?" And she would point out, we all are part of raising the money to do whatever needs to be done. Yes, some might have more than others, but we all have something that we contribute. You can knock on a door, you can do it. I mean, and she would just go on. And her commitment is something that I'm hoping that we'll find someone soon that will catch on and to be able to do the kind of things that she was doing, make the kind of commitment that she made, because she was truly an organizer and her heart was in it day in and day out. And if you saw her, you knew that out of her mouth would come some words of encouragement and talk about what we might be able to do to uplift people. She was good about that. I mean, that was something she was good about. And of course, I think Mitt, in a lot of ways, sort of modeled herself after Dorothy Height in terms of being able to encourage. And of course, you would meet her students sometime and they would talk about her involvement, over at the school where she taught for many, many years. And when I meet her students and they talk about her influence and the kind of things that she was able to say and do and how they were encouraged by it, I feel very good. But here again, we have a lot of work to do. And I'm hoping that we now can pull ourselves together and to be able to start doing it. Now, one would say, how do you do it when you had 12 and now you're down to 2? As the young people can say, "What's up?" Well, this is what I feel is up, that we have to just start getting people in the various positions on Capitol Hill. And also not running for Congress maybe, but working in a person, an office on the Hill. And the person does not have to be a social worker, but you are a social worker working in that person's office. The other thing is that there's a lot of other positions that you can run for. And then once you run for one position, it might be another one and sort of climb the hill, school board, state legislature, city council, whatever it might be, you think about running for it. And then if that opens up the congressional seat, run for that. And I'll be honest with you, I just get excited when I hear that social workers are involved in running for office in some aspect or some phase or some place, I must admit. And I do try to be helpful when I hear it, to help in some kind of way, because I think it's just important, so important for us as professional social workers to get involved in the arena of electoral politics and work it and work it and work it, and to be able to try and move things in a different direction. So I'm excited about this. Is Women's History Month, and I think that we should do everything we can to be able to work with females to be able to move this country in a different direction. And I think we can. I really think we can if we work together. I think that I would like to close with this little story. The little boy was walking across a field one day and he fell in a deep hole. And as he cried out for help, the first man came by with a rope, but the rope was too short to reach the little boy. The little boy continued to cry out. The second man came by with the rope, just a little longer than the first rope, but not long enough to reach the little boy. The little boy continued to crowd, and the third man came by with a rope just a little longer than the first 2 ropes, but not long enough to reach the little boy. Finally, the little boy looked up in total desperation, and he said to them, "Tie your ropes together." So I come to say to social workers, regardless to community org, policy, doesn't matter, administration, whatever the phase you're in, let us tie our ropes together and to be able to move this country in a positive direction. We have the ability, the skills, and the know-how to be able to do it. Let's do it. And I am willing to do whatever I can to make certain that we do it.